Right now, we're bringing up Jory. We're bringing up Marty here in a second. And with Shake and Jory, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm awesome. We've been breaking down the science of the world's strongest man, Eddie Hall, and John was kicking off the conversation. Jimmy, if we can turn protein break on the banner here, Johnny was talking about the food that this guy must eat. Jory, right, to be the world's strongest man. And we know that we're eating a lot of protein to be the world's strongest man. Today, let's dive into the topics of protein around this idea of plant-based, different types of protein, plant-based versus animal-based. And Jory, you and me, kid, we know John and Marty are big fans of animal protein. We know, Jory, that Johnny eats more meat than most of us probably can eat in a whole lifetime. But here's where he calls it flesh, yes. But here's where things get interesting, and we've got some strong opinions and maybe a few surprises along the way. Jory, let's get into this question for you. Sorry, Marty, sorry, Johnny, I'm going to throw Jory up here, and I'm going to stand next to her with my muscles and support her. Can plant-based protein actually be superior, or can it be as good as flesh? Jory Jansen.
It's going to depend. And I know that's going to be like, oh, every dietitian. It depends.
No, as Christina would say, it's not an or, it's an and. So good.
It is an and. Yes, it can be just as. I don't think it's superior. And so here's the evidence. And if you would have asked me even 5 years ago, I would have said, absolutely not. It's way too challenging. You can't do it. It has to be animal sources. But the evidence isn't showing that anymore. Is it easier? Is it more? It's
convenient.
It's definitely can be more convenient. The quality, high quality proteins, it's easier in terms of animal sources. Yes. But what the evidence is now showing is that plant-based proteins can be just as effective. Here's the challenge though, because when you're like that big of a dude, you can't eat a ton of fiber and reach the calories that you need. The variety of nutrients your body needs to be like that. So to be a vegan and get there, it's not that it's impossible, it's really hard. Because if we think fat, fiber, protein, you feel fuller a lot longer. So if you're feeling fuller a lot longer, which is great if you're trying to lose weight, it's not awesome if you're trying to put on bulk. Right. So it depends on your goal. I've worked with vegan athletes and NHL athletes, and they're vegan, and it's challenging, but they can do it.
Yes. Shinko has a comment here which says, and this is a good one. Shinko says, I thought vegans were nutrient deficient. And John's a big fan. And John, we talk nutrients all the time here. So Shinko's, I thought vegans were nutrient deficient. Support that or shoot down that myth or that truth, Jory.
Sure. So if you're not planned, whether you're vegan or not, you can be nutrient deficient. So I've got athletes that have low serum ferritin. So your iron stores are low. And you're eating animal sources that are crazy high in bioavailable iron. So iron that's easily absorbed by the body. But then you'll have a vegan athlete where they do have to be careful of iron. They do need to eat more iron-containing foods that are plant-based to reach the same amount of iron that if you were eating animal sources.
Yes.
So if you could incorporate a bit of a balance, so the Christine's so if you could have animal sources and also include plant-based sources, there are research, so it's not in terms of building lean muscle mass, but there's research to show you're building and maintaining lean muscle mass and also helping with heart health. So those that combine both seem to be healthier long term. So what are you looking for your outcome to be? Is it to be like big? Is it to be big and healthy? Is it to be healthy? What are your goals? But you can meet your protein requirements going vegan, but you may need to supplement depending on how bioavailable your B12 example foods are for your body. So you might need to supplement with vitamin B12, maybe iron as well. But other than that, you can calcium, everything else. Those things can be met easily through a vegan diet.
Interesting. So let's get into this one then. So John and Marty, we have been raised, especially John and I, the old dudes here, that
me too.
You too, Marty, because you're raised by the same guys that were teaching us. So we taught you the same thing. Jory, one of the big myths floating around is that people always say that plant-based proteins are incomplete and don't give you the full spectrum of amino acids. Johnny talks about aminos all the time here in the lab. That animal protein does. But here's the twist. Some nutritionists, maybe you don't, argue that as long as you're eating a variety of plant-based foods throughout the day, your body still get all the amino acids that you need. Jory, is that true or not true?
It's true. It's variety.
Uh-oh.
Absolutely. If you are eating only, if you're only eating, actually tofu's a nice one anyway, it's soybean. And man, you're not going to get breasts from eating soy. That has been debunked. You can find tons of research on that. You're not getting boobs. Promise.
Thank you. I needed to know that.
Okay. Yeah. There's research on that, so don't forget. But that's one that has a higher B12 content, which isn't typically in plant-based proteins. But yeah, the key is variety. So if you start mixing, and even when you start mixing some of your whole grains with the plant-based protein, that's increasing the amino acid profile. So as long as you're being purposeful, you're planning, you eat variety. Some people like to eat the same thing all the time. They're chicken and broccoli, right? You're going to eventually not meet certain nutrient requirements. So you can get all the amino acids. You just have to be mindful of the variety. As children, they need to more often than not combine them at the same meal. With adults, you don't necessarily have to combine them, the variety and meal, but throughout your day, it's important to get those amino acids. Yeah.
So I'm going to set Johnny up here. So what we like to do here in the lab is have different points of view, different points of view, different opinions, different experiences. And what I like about having John in the lab is John has lived a life of experiences, perhaps not through scientific tests, but actually through experience. And I've gotten to know John over the last number of months, and he shares his different experiences. So I'd love to hear John's point of view based on human experiences, not so much through scientific studies. Johnny, what's your thought on, we just asked the question of Jory. I saw you smile and lean into the camera, brother.
Yeah, first I think my internet's good right now, so I can get a few sentences out here. So I would say this. Any nutritionist that tells an athlete that's trying to go high level in something like a strength sport, oh yes, you can do it. You've just got to thread all this shit together to make sure. That nutritionist clearly has never tried to do it, because that shit does not work. There's nobody in the world-class level that's not chewing down a shit of flesh, period, end of story. And can you get enough? There we go, I'm back. So could you improve? Absolutely. But could you improve at a rate big enough to get to an international state in the strength sport eating plants? We've yet to see it.
And I think that's probably the key point here is that it will be interesting for us to get to a point where we are seeing maybe an Eddie Hall or somebody like a John Anderson, Eddie Hall on the world-class stage who has lived, who's gained those experiences through alternative diets and what we've traditionally leaned into, Jory, right? So, if we look at a guy like Eddie and so forth, mostly probably generally driven by flesh. And I guess to John's point, we haven't seen on the international stage yet somebody who's been generally fueled by some of the alternative sources that science is now putting on the table and saying this works. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, Jory, but I think perhaps time needs to catch up where you have some dude training right now where in maybe 10 or 20 years is going to wake up and say, okay, I'm a vegan or plant-based strongman. I've been able to uphold some of these myths or truths that have happened over the last 50 years. Jory, I see you nodding and leaning into that.
So I don't work with the strongman. I work with NHL. I work with Olympic, Paralympic athletes. So that's my scope.
Yes.
And so from not just research, but also my experience with athletes, I have seen it. It is a lot of work. It is. It's not the easiest path. For sure.
I think, Jory, sorry to interrupt, but that's the key. Sorry to interrupt, but that's the key, isn't it? And John and you said it best, because John's all about simplicity, and you said it best too. Yes, you can succeed at it, but you're going to have to do this and do this. I remember talking to AJ, and he was training a vegan athlete, and he was talking to me about having to help her fix her diet with all the incomplete things. And he just said he does a lot more work than just telling somebody to go eat some meat. And I think that's your point, isn't it, Jory? That there's just a lot more work involved, Jory?
At this point anyway, because we haven't put it out there as planned out and as simplified as we can.
Yes.
As it is out there as eat your chicken and broccoli and rice. But we do have options and they are there. The challenge though, which I think everyone on this call can agree with, is that when you're trying to make body composition changes,
Mm-hmm.
generally it's increase the protein, decrease the carbohydrate source. So you
Mm-hmm.
still need a certain amount of energy availability or calories. You
Mm-hmm.
need a certain amount, right? And so with a lot of the plant sources of protein, they're also very high carbohydrate. So you
Yes.
have to then, yeah, it's just, so then.
Well, that's what Johnny was talking about too, Jory, because we're talking about body composition. And I remember John said a comment to Marty a couple weeks ago, man, you can't sniff some air and inhale carbohydrates. So there's carbs in many things. And if you're really focused on composition, you don't want to, you want to eliminate carbohydrates for the most part. So I can appreciate that comment, Jory, for sure. Johnny?
One thing I wanted to say that I actually probably should have started off with, which in terms of what I was saying, that any nutritionist that says that blah, 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 basically, like I said, you can make a lot of progress, but what we're talking about, like with Eddie Hall, that's nobody's made the world stage there. But what Jory started off with by saying it'd be really difficult because the amount you would have to consume. Yeah. So that right there pretty much eliminates someone at a world trying to get to a world stage that you couldn't possibly, I should say couldn't. We've never seen anyone be able to stomach enough food that's not dense fatty meats to get to that level. Because a really good, say, T-bone steak, there's calorically, that's a lot more than a pile of soybeans. Yeah. It's the amount of food you'd have to consume, which is exactly what she said from the beginning. It would be very difficult to consume that much. So guys that are worried about getting to the world stage of strength, their minds are like, what do I have to do to get there fast? That's our mindset, period, end of story. And the idea of, okay, shit, I'm going to have to eat 6 times the amount of food, all these greens, that's it doesn't even enter the thought process. So to Jory's credit, she started off by saying the amount you'd have to consume would just be so much, it would be very difficult. And that's probably, I shouldn't say it's probably, it's one of the reasons for sure why we don't see plant-based guys at the top.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask Jory a question real quick?
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of people, like a lot of elite athletes that are vegan, they say that most of them got their foundation, like they became elite eating flesh, what Johnny would say, eating chicken, steak, fish, seafood. Is that true with the athletes you work with, or have most of them been like vegan like their whole life?
Most would have had animal sources. There is a smaller population that have always been vegetarian of some sort. So if you're vegan, so that's no animal products, it can be challenging, especially with the amount of traveling. If you're lacto-ovo, then you're including dairy products, eggs. So it's that much easier, right? If you're pescatarian, you're including fish, but not other animal sources. So it depends on the level of vegetarianism. So if we're going vegan, I don't have a ton of vegan athletes, for sure. And most do decide that they like the idea of vegetarian because it allows the plant-based as well as the animal-based, but they get to select where that would be. So that maybe they're good with eggs and cheese and fish, but they don't want to have chicken and beef.
Yep, understood. So,
yeah. Awesome. Hey, you're hanging out with Keith, Jory, and John and Marty here. Mornings and Live with Keith and friends here. It says shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern time on the protein break. We bring Jory in Monday, Wednesday, Fridays to talk about nutrition through the lens of protein. And I'm really glad to have her here today. And what I liked about today's segment is that we're all offering different points of view. We're offering different ways to get to the end. We got Johnny's 8,500 years of experience of eating flesh, 5, 6, 10 pounds of meat per day. We got Jory coming in with offering some alternative points of views. And we got Marty asking some great questions about, hey, what's a traditional athlete doing today? So I invite you to join us here Monday, Wednesday, Friday for this protein break segment. Jory, some closing comments from you as we wrap up today's segment from you, Jory, today.
Yeah, if you're not aiming to be like on stage bodybuilder, there's probably a lot more wiggle room in terms of what you're going to do.
Yes.
So you have to, again, we always go back to its perspective. Who's your audience? What are you looking to gain?
That's it.
I think that's always important, no matter what route you choose for exercise, for nutrition, mental performance, weaning. So all of that just depends on like, where are you at in your stage of life? And not to feel like if you're doing something or not doing something that there's any shame that you're doing things wrong. It's about progress and how can you make your life, your world a little bit better.
Awesome, Jory. Great insights all around.
Can I say something real quick here, brother? Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jory, we've had a lot of people come on and talk about different methodologies of dieting and weight loss and nutrition. And I'm just going to say, you come on and you really share some really good stuff. So I want to thank you. You're really uncovering a lot of positive, understandable stuff for our audience. So I really appreciate you bringing on some really good perspectives for people, like the way that you talk about protein. Most people don't think like that, and they need to hear the stuff that you say. So thank you.
Awesome.
Hey Keith, what did I call Jory? Oh, my bad.
You know,
What did I call Jory, Keith?
Oh yeah. Hey, you mean this, Marty?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he's one of the goats here in the lab. And Jory, we do not offer the goat label up to many in this lab here. I offered it up freely one time, and Marty gave me shit. He's like, dude, you can't just give it up freely to people. Like, all right. So
yeah, he gave the goat to somebody who did not deserve it.
Yeah, so we selectively pull it out, and Marty's got his list from. He's okay. Jory's got the goat. David Sauer's got the goat. So I'm very protective of the goat button, or else my friend Marty's gonna kick my ass. So Jory, you've got the goat here in Winnipeg button. There you go. And we're going to bring Jory back on Monday to talk protein break on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But here's the thing. Great insights all around. At the end of the day, as Jory said it best, it's all about finding what works for your body and your training goals. I shared my experience. I thought for the longest time I wanted to be strong. And AJ's like, okay, I'll make it strong. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm husky. He's like, oh, what you really want is you want to be aesthetically pleasing. Yes, it's about body composition, right? So you got to know your goals. You got to know your body. And if you're listening and if you got questions about protein, whether it's plant-based or animal-based, I invite you to leave comments in the section. Come back on Monday. We'll get them over to Jory and we'll keep the conversation going. But Jory, have an awesome weekend loop and we'll see you back on Monday, okay?
Thanks, you guys.